Good afternoon. Welcome to the Department of State. Several things to mention before taking your questions. The Secretary this morning gave a visit at a women's conference of global thought leaders and innovations called TED Women, which, in case you're asking, stands for technology, entertainment, and design. In other words, leading women around the world who are leaders in their particular field of emphasis. Once again, talking about the vitally important role of women and girls in the future of communities and broader societies. I think she has just finished also making some remarks to the Business Roundtable CEO quarterly meeting here in Washington, discussing the President's National Export Initiative. Today in the Ivory Coast, Special Representative, the Secretary General, Y.J. Choi, made a very authoritative statement in which he explained how the recent election in Cote d'Ivoire was certified and made clear that the will of the people points to one conclusion: the people have chosen one person, not two, as the winner of the presidential election. The Ivorian people have chosen Mr. Alassane Ouattara with an irrefutable margin as the winner over current President Gbagbo. And this follows yesterday a very clear statement by ECOWAS, where it recognized President-elect Ouattara in a meeting in Abuja. And the 11 heads of state or president or representatives participating in this summit called on President Gbagbo to abide by the election results and allow Ouattara to take his rightful seat as the head of government. We continue to watch this situation closely and continue to call on the existing government to do the right thing, begin the process of a peaceful transfer of power, and lead to a peaceful, stable solution for the future of Cote d'Ivoire. Last week, or early this week, the President Obama sent a personal letter to President Gbagbo as well, encouraging him to respect the election results. Staying in Africa for a moment, Special Envoy Scott Gration is in Khartoum today, where he has met with Sudanese government officials and international counterparts to discuss ongoing preparations for the Southern Sudan referendum, the security and humanitarian situation in Darfur, and ongoing efforts to reach mutual agreement between the CPA parties on the way ahead in Abyei. He met today with Sudanese Minister of Defense, General Abdel Rahim Mohammed Hussein, and also with Russian Special Envoy Mikhail Margalov. And tomorrow he will visit El Fashir on the first day of a three-day visit in Darfur. We also continue to monitor very closely the situation in Haiti. The United States, together with Haiti's international partners, stand ready to support efforts to thoroughly review irregularities so that the final electoral results are consistent with the will of the Haitian people as expressed through their votes. We remain concerned by the Provisional Electoral Council's announcement of preliminary results that are inconsistent with the published results of the National Election Observation Council, or CNO, which had more than 5,500 observers and observed the count in 1,600 voting centers nationwide. As Haiti goes through this process of a review and a designated period for electoral complaints leading to the runoff election on January 16, we urge all political actors and their supporters to remain calm and to work peacefully through the contestation period, providing the electoral process to resolve any claims of irregularities. Here at the Department today, we are hosting for a series of meetings the Secretary General of Italy. He is the equivalent of the Deputy Foreign Minister, General Giampero Massolo. He'll have a series of meetings over the next couple of days with Undersecretary Bob Hormats, Assistant Secretary Phil Gordon, Assistant Secretary Esther Brimmer, Those meetings will happen today and tomorrow. He will meet with Richard Holbrooke and Robert Einhorn, reflecting the wide range of interest and cooperation that we have with the government of Italy. And finally, just to kind of review where we were yesterday, I know we had a briefing here and then had a briefing in New York, but as we did acknowledge yesterday, regarding the Middle East, we have determined that a moratorium extension will not at this time provide the best basis for resuming direct negotiations. In the coming days and weeks, we will engage with both sides on the core substantive issues at stake in this conflict and with the Arab states and other international partners on creating a firm basis to work toward our shared goal of a framework agreement on all permanent status issues, a goal which we and the parties remain committed. We will consult with the parties in the coming days as we move forward. And as we proceed, our position on settlements has not and will not change. The United States does not accept the legitimacy of continued Israeli settlements, and we will continue to express that position. We indicated that we will be having meetings and contacts with both the Israelis and the Palestinians in the coming days. Senator Mitchell will travel back to the region next week to consult both with the parties and also with other regional leaders.
So there are meetings both here at State and in the region next week?
We are and will remain in contact with the Israelis and Palestinians through this week. George Mitchell will be in the region next week. I don't have particular days yet. Anticipating your question, when we have more clarity on exactly where he'll go, when, we'll let you know.
This looks like a major step back from September 1st. It looks as if now everything is going back into indirect talks, no more face-to-face talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Some are even suggesting that this is a major failure for the Obama administration. What's your response?
Well, not at all. Let me work from back to front. We continue to pursue a framework agreement on the permanent status issues. We continue to believe that in order to resolve those core issues, direct negotiations will be required, and we will be consulting with the parties on the best way to achieve that shared goal. I would describe this as a change in tactics, not a change in strategy. It's not a change in our objectives at all. To some extent, in our view, after intensive discussions with the Israelis over a couple of weeks at the request of the Palestinians, we thought that this had, in a sense, become an end in itself rather than a means to an end. So we are shifting to a different path, and we'll be consulting with the parties in the coming days on how to move forward.
What is the different path?
Well, we're going to focus on the substance and try to begin to make progress on the core issues themselves, and we think that will create the kind of momentum that we need to see to get to sustained and meaningful negotiations.
So basically, you're going to ask the Palestinians next week to give up their own demands for freezing settlements and say, let's go directly to the core issues.
Well, again, we've had a very clear position all along that the parties should get into direct negotiations. That remains our point of view. The real issue is how to both achieve that and then make progress. We're simply acknowledging that after intensive effort, the moratorium was not the best basis to move forward, and in essence, we're shifting gears.
So, are you looking for other confidence-building measures other than freezing settlements? Is that what you're going to look for next week when you meet with the Palestinians?
No, we're looking to find a way to make progress on the core issues, to move towards that framework agreement and move toward the point where we end the conflict once and for all. So in other words, we're talking about how do we get from here to there. We had pursued the concept of a renewal of a moratorium at the behest of the Palestinian delegation, and after intensive effort, we've come to the conclusion that at this time that's not the best way to proceed.
Next week, will there be three-way talks? Will there be talks between the Israelis, the Palestinians, and the U.S. together in the same room? It doesn't look like it. You're just going to meet separately. It'll be indirect proximity talks.
Again, George will be in the region next week when I'll be able to describe, where he'll go and who he'll see, and in what form, a little bit
Will
later.
be meetings in Washington.
Right now, I'm not anticipating that we would have Israelis and the Palestinians in the same room at this time.
If you're saying the moratorium is not the best way to advance a peace talk, at the same time you're saying that you're still adamant that the settlement issues is of major concern and you consider them illegitimate. Isn't that contradictory in terms? I mean, simply this position?
No, I mean we have always supported direct negotiations as the only means to reach an agreement, and through an agreement, and the conflict. That remains our view. There was considerable thought given to a moratorium as being a mechanism, by which we could make the kind of progress we're looking for, and at this point, after an intensive effort, we've concluded that that particular course is just simply not going to bear fruit at this time, and we're going to move in a different direction.
So can you give us an idea what the other alternatives? I mean, if this path has been blocked and it's not working, in the scope of thinking and new ideas that's been thrown around, what other alternatives that you think you can pursue? How can you move the Palestinians from a position of saying, we're not going to negotiate unless you freeze the settlements, to say now you have to overlook that because we're looking in different directions?
We're not overlooking anything. In other words, the core issues remain at the heart of this effort. We are going to shift the discussion and begin to focus intensively on the core issues and see if we can make progress on the substance itself, and we'll be looking to see if these discussions and this effort creates the momentum that we would expect. Ultimately, we'll have to move back into direct negotiations at some point.
Are you still giving the incentives to the Israelis? That package of incentives is still on the table for the Israelis to take? The package of incentives that you gave, still there?
That is not under discussion at this time.
It's not under discussion at this time,
Has it been withdrawn?
but it's not been withdrawn. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we are no longer at this time. We are not pursuing a settlement moratorium, renewal of the settlement moratorium. We're moving in a different direction, and that package is not currently under discussion.
Should the IDF then assume that it's not going to get the 20 fighter jets?
Well, we remain committed to Israel's security, but those discussions will occur in a different context.
Would you rule out giving the Israelis the F-35 fighter jets? Because
Well, put this way, I will rule in that we will continue to work with Israel as a friend and ally on its security requirements. We have done that over decades, and that's not going to change.
Can I ask you, does the U.S. know yet how it plans to get the Israelis, the Palestinians to agree to any future talks? They've been pretty firm on holding that they'd like to see the settlement freeze before resuming any sort of negotiations.
Well, we had Daniel Rubinstein in Jerusalem had two meetings Daniel Rubinstein, who is in Jerusalem, had two meetings yesterday with President Abbas, and we will continue our discussions with the Palestinians. And as we said, George Mitchell will be in the region next week.
As a result of those two meetings, did your Consul General get any sense that the Palestinians are willing to move forward on talks without that settlement freeze as a prerequisite?
Again, we are explaining where we are and explaining and also seeking Palestinian views on the best path forward.
I mean, take us the next step. Are the Palestinians willing to move forward based on your
Again,
consultations?
we're having discussions with both sides, and we'll just leave it there. Said.
PJ, just to understand you clearly, you're saying that the package was contingent upon the Israelis agreeing to a settlement freeze? And if that did not happen, so the package is no longer there?
We are at this time we are not pursuing a settlement moratorium, and we're not pursuing that kind of discussion with the Israelis.
Okay, the spokesperson for the European Union yesterday said that the settlements were illegitimate and an obstacle to peace. Would you say the same thing?
You know, this is a concern, obviously, for both the Israelis and the Palestinians. As we've made clear, we both parties have responsibilities here. Both parties need to avoid unilateral actions that undermine trust and do impede the process. Our position on settlements is clear. I just reiterated again. We'll continue to express that view, but we are focused here on how can we get the parties to begin to work on the substance and through that move this effort forward.
Okay, yesterday, just to follow up, a quick
Sure.
follow-up. Yesterday, you said, or someone said, that we will look for different ways to reignite, basically, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, to revitalize the talks. Can you share with us what are these things, or how?
Well, that's the fundamental purpose of the contacts we've had over the last few days, and the contacts we'll have in the coming days. What is the best path forward? How can we begin, to actually, address, the substance, the core issues inside, this process? And we're looking for ways to create, forward movement and momentum. We had viewed the moratorium as one way to achieve that. We don't think that's going to bear fruit at this time, and we're moving in a different direction to achieve the same objective.
And one last thing, you would not endorse Palestinian effort to declare a state, I mean, or have it recognized.
Our view on that, is not changed. Ultimately, again, to end the conflict, you need an agreement. To get to an agreement, you're going to have direct negotiations. We continue to believe that is the only mechanism through which, we achieve, success. And we believe that, bringing these issues to an international forum will be a distraction. And will just add complexity to an already difficult, circumstance.
So then how do you persuade President Abbas to stop his efforts to get countries in Latin America, possibly in Europe as well, from not recognizing a Palestinian state
Well,
with
all I can tell you is
367 borders?
President Abbas is very familiar with our position.
Is the U.S. going to take any measures against countries that recognizes a Palestinian state in a unilateral way?
Well, again, countries have the right to set their own policies. We believe strongly that as this moves forward, we're going to need international support, for this effort, and that's why we've worked effectively with the quartet and others to support this process. Why, in addition to George Mitchell talking to the parties next week, he'll be talking to others in the region. So we want to have as much international support for this process as possible, and we continue to believe that that international support for other avenues is ultimately a distraction.
Are you not?
This direction, you didn't really say the direction you're
well,
going
no, there's
in
a
now.
clear plan for this direction, Lon.
You have a plan.
No, we think we have the right plan. We think we have the right, strategy. We are just adapting the tactics, in support of that strategy.
Sorry, what's the plan again?
Well,
Well, you described the previous plan.
Thanks, Lon.
And now you're saying you're talking to the others about consulting with the parties on what the new path or plan will be. But so,
well,
as Lon
again,
says, you
I
probably
mean,
don't have that.
I can't be more clear in saying that it is our belief at some point in this process the parties will have to return to direct negotiations. We don't see an alternative to be able to resolve the core issues, get to a framework agreement, and ultimately get to a final agreement that ends the conflict once and for all. So at some point in time, we want to see a resumption of direct negotiations. What we're talking about now is what is the means, to get to that point. We tried one avenue. That avenue has not borne fruit, and now we're pursuing a different avenue, but the destination is still
Okay,
the
what's
same.
the avenue then? If we don't ask about the plan, what about the avenue? You seem to be leaving a gap here. So how do you get from here to there?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
What is? You don't know what the avenue is.
You're not having.
No. I mean, we push away. There is a path forward. The real question is, can the parties summon the political will, to move down, that road? And we understand that there are different political challenges on both sides. At the heart of this is not a substantive challenge. It is a political challenge. For a combination of reasons, the politics on both sides did not actually, enable us to move forward, along a path and through a settlement moratorium. So we are adapting our approach, but we're not adapting our strategy. Ultimately, the parties themselves have to sit down together, work through the core issues. The core issues are very well known. Actually, the potential solutions are already, outlined through, previous efforts. We just have to figure out what combination, works most effectively to get to the kind of sustained, meaningful dialogue that is required to get to a framework agreement and ultimately to achieve peace in the region.
Given that the moratorium extension failed, do you believe that Netanyahu and his team were negotiating in good faith in
Yes.
the last 3 weeks?
Yes, we believe that both sides are committed to this process. They want the United States to continue our involvement in this process, we reached an impasse through the mechanism of a settlement moratorium, and we are simply trying to see if there's another way to advance this effort.
Political
TJ.
will, though. Settler groups were arguing.
One at a time.
Settler groups were arguing today that this is a victory over the Americans and their irrational, pie-in-the-sky requests. Do you believe
Well,
that
it's
Netanyahu
not
has the political will
it's
to
not a
make this
victory for
happen?
anybody. It's not a loss for anybody. It is simply a recognition that an intensive effort at achieving a settlement moratorium as one mechanism to advance the process, did not bear fruit. We are now going to look at other vehicles, one or more vehicles, through which we can, make the kind of progress we're looking for.
Why is it not a victory for the settlers if they can continue at will to build wherever they want in the West Bank and East Jerusalem?
Well, it's not a victory in the sense that both the Israelis and Palestinians have significant interests in crossing this finish line. On the Palestinian side, a viable state, and on the Israeli side, the recognition and stability and peace that it has long sought. The real question is, choose the yard line that you're on. Just what is the means through which you can get from here to there? And there's no one way to achieve that. We've tried one way, and it didn't enable the progress that we're looking for, and so we're moving in a different direction.
PJ, can I ask you, given that you're changing your tactic now midstream, does the administration still believe it can achieve the framework deal in a year? As
Yes.
it did originally? What do you base that optimism on? You seem to be the only ones.
Well, put it this way, our objective remains the same as it was back in August.
But the circumstances don't appear to have improved.
Well, again, that's we were clear-eyed when we entered into this in August. We're clear-eyed today as we recognize that our efforts of the last 4 months have not given us the forward momentum that we were looking for, and so we are shifting our approach, but we are still focused on the goal of a framework agreement within a year, and we believe that is still achievable. Obviously, a lot of hard work is going to have to be done. It's not going to be easy, but we haven't changed our objective.
Can you say whether the ball has moved forward at all since early September when you launched this? I mean, are you really now starting again and trying to achieve this in now?
No, we're
8 months or
not
3 months?
starting again. We've because both sides remain committed to this. We've reaffirmed that in our recent conversations. We're just moving. We're trying a different avenue to get to the same ultimate destination.
But can you say how the ball has moved forward in the intervening 3 months now?
I think there is a commitment to the process. We have had conversations that touch on substantive issues. We just want to find, the right mechanism to get into a more intensive, detailed discussion of the core issues. To some extent, as I mentioned a minute ago, it's almost like the moratorium had become an end in itself rather than a means to move the process forward. We're just shifting our approach.
Would you say that the right mechanism is to include other Arabic states in terms of the Arab peace plan and have a comprehensive peace deal similar to Madrid?
Well, the other states in the region are already involved. We've
but not
had
on a Madrid-style conference.
no, but the other states have been supporting this process. They have had their own conversations with the parties, and they remain as determined as we are to continue to find ways to move forward.
I just cannot understand the optimism. I mean, we're talking about a few months from now, end of the year, everything failed so far. You're not giving us any ideas of how you're going to move this
we are
process forward.
clear-eyed and realistic about this. We knew going in this was going to be hard. It has proven to be as hard as we had anticipated. And it is difficult, it is emotional, it's complex. It requires the leaders to summon the political support to advance this process, and we're committed to that. And we'll be sending George back to the region next week to see how to what's the best route forward.
The Secretary talks about new ideas on Friday night at the Sabban Center.
The Secretary will have a speech on Friday night. It will touch extensively on these issues, and I'll not step on the news that she'll make. Hey, Laura, go ahead.
Can you talk about how this was announced yesterday, that essentially the administration's abandoning the moratorium idea? Sort of, I know you were asked it at the briefing yesterday, and on the record, you didn't speak to it. And then it was announced on background in Jerusalem by a U.S. official, and then confirmed by U.S. officials on background yesterday. Curious why you guys decided to do it that way.
The only point to yesterday was that we were timing our announcements to meetings that were being held in the region where we were keeping both sides informed of our thinking.
And you didn't want to wait till you had the Secretary to say what the positive new policy would be? I mean, it seems like all the headlines today worldwide are, U.S. Middle East
Laura,
policy.
as you know very well, holding information in the context of Middle East peace is a very difficult thing for the parties to do.
On the, you said that Mr. Netanyahu negotiated in good faith. So when he told you, what did he tell you? I'm sorry, I cannot convince X number of my cabinet. I'm awfully sorry. How did he say it? Where was the stonewall?
We do not have any quarrel with how either side has approached this, and we are convinced that both sides remain as committed to this process today as they were back in August. Again, there are substantive challenges to this, and there are political challenges to this, and the political challenges are showing themselves to be complex, difficult, and we're looking, for the right combination that allows us to develop the political support necessary for leaders, to make the hard decisions that they will have to make.
Wait, you don't have any quarrel with how either side approached this, or do you have a problem with the way both sides approach this?
There's no good in pointing fingers. We are committed to this process. We believe they are committed to this process, and we're trying to find the right mechanism, to make, to move forward and get the kind of sustained and meaningful dialogue and negotiation that is necessary to achieve success.
Some observers would say that actually you brought this upon yourself. The U.S. brought it upon itself by making that such a huge issue. And then when it fell apart, it looks as if your strategy failed. What do you say?
Jill, the settlements is a big issue on both sides. That's obvious by the politics of both on the Palestinian side and the Israeli side. This is not something that we brought upon ourselves. This is a reflection of a reality that still exists, and the real issue is how to move forward and be able to address the core issues in the current environment. We tried one tactic, and now we're shifting to a different tactic.
Can I change the subject?
Can I just stay on here 1 second?
I thought I understood that the Palestinians and Israelis were going to come next week to Washington to discuss this. You said George Mitchell is going over there, so I take it that plan.
We are having and will be having meetings on both sides, prior to George's travel.
On both sides, what do you mean by that? Say it again.
Well, again, we expect to have discussions with senior representatives on both sides. We are still working to set those up.
Could be in Washington.
It could be in Washington, or it could be both in Washington and in the region.
Is it your understanding that an overwhelming majority of Mr. Netanyahu's cabinet were opposed to the deal?
That's a better question to ask the Israeli government.
But you have negotiated
Again,
with them.
that's we understand the political challenge that the Prime Minister has faced and is facing, but we'll leave it to the Israelis
I
to
guess my
describe it.
question is it your feeling that with the current composition of the cabinet, is it insurmountable that we would actually reach a back?
If we thought it was insurmountable, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
I have a question about Victor Bout. The press in Thailand has reported that Victor Bout was extradited to the U.S. with the kind of implicit understanding that former Prime Minister Taskin would be lured to the United States to testify before the Helsinki Commission and then would be extradited to Thailand. Did his the former Prime Minister's extradition come up in discussions with the Thai government about Victor Bout?
Look, let me take one thing first. Victor Bout is here in the United States and is facing prosecution for a variety of charges, and I'll defer to the Justice Department to describe those charges. As to any other visit, on the one hand, visa applications are confidential, and on the other hand, extradition matters are confidential. So I wouldn't connect the two.
Well, but can you say explicitly that did you make an agreement or not with the Thai government to lure the former Prime Minister here just to extradite him back to Thailand?
Well, first of all, the Thai government, with the support of the United States, arrested Mr. Bout. There was a legal process, and he was extradited to the United States, consistent with the extradition treaty that exists between the United States and Thailand. For any individual who may or may not be in the United States, there has to be a basis, for an arrest, and then there has to be a basis for an extradition. So, I can't, I would not, make a connection between the case of Mr. Bout, which we think we have a very strong case, and other issues.
Different topic. Can I ask about on WikiLeaks, actually? The Secretary's office put out a statement yesterday about her conversation with Foreign Minister Rudd of Australia. There was only kind of one short line in there saying that they discussed WikiLeaks. Can you give us a little bit more about what they talked about? Specifically, did they talk about any U.S. efforts to press charges against Julian Assange, who's an Australian citizen? The reason I ask is because Rudd has been out there since then saying that he doesn't feel that Assange should be prosecuted.
The Secretary's had a range of conversations with world leaders. I'm not aware that any of those conversations, whether with Foreign Minister Rudd or any other leader, focused on prosecution. She has had a consistent message, to world leaders, some on the phone, some in person, demonstrating our commitment to continue to work with countries on our mutual interests. it would be, there is an ongoing investigation within the United States government on this case, and we have reached no conclusions as to who beyond one individual is responsible.
Can you say whether you disagree with Foreign Minister Rudd's and actually I think a few other Australian officials' assessment that Mr. Assange has no culpability in the WikiLeaks release?
Well, let's be clear. As I read what Foreign Minister Rudd said, he's correct in that the primary responsibility for the leak existed within the United States government. We have acknowledged that. It was somebody within our government, sworn under oath to protect the Constitution, who violated that oath. And we have an individual under arrest, and that person will be held accountable, for what we consider as a crime under U.S. law. Again, that's a matter for the Justice Department and the Defense Department. But certainly we believe that what Mr. Assange has done in the aftermath of that leak has put the interests of our country and others at risk, and put the lives of people who are reflected in these documents at risk. We haven't changed our view.
Thank you. Back to Haiti, when you made some opening remarks about Haiti. President Preval is accusing the United States of being responsible, at least partly responsible, for the rioting, saying because of its criticism of the election. Do you have any response to that?
I haven't seen those comments. We have and continue to support the government of Haiti. We have been a leading supporter of this election process. We've been a leading supporter of the government of Haiti, led by President Preval. We will be a leading supporter in the reconstruction of the country, and the government that is going to be put in place early next year will be leading that effort. The United States is in no way responsible for the actions of any individual. What we are determined to help Haiti achieve is a credible election and a result, not one that the United States will impose, but one that the people of Haiti can participate in fully, and that the government that emerges reflects the will of the Haitian people and will have the legitimacy and support necessary to move the country forward.
Have these events set back the reconstruction effort?
That's hard to say. Obviously, the situation on the ground is very tense at the present time. Many employees of ours at the embassy found it difficult to get to work. The airport's been closed because of the difficulty in personnel getting to that location. We certainly would hope that calm will prevail, and the efforts on reconstruction, as well as day-to-day life in Haiti, can continue. While there is a designated process to work through the complaints that have or will be filed.
The referendum in Abyei in January. Why does the U.S. government believe that it's not going to happen after all?
Well, the parties, as we've there is a referendum called for under the CPA. It is up to the parties, to move that forward. We've had intensive discussions going back months with the parties on this issue. While they have been able to agree on and are supporting the effort on the referendum on South Sudan, they have not been able to agree on a basis for the referendum to move forward with respect to Abyei. It is a very complex situation. We remain engaged with the parties. They ultimately have to determine how to resolve the status of Abyei. There is a set requirement under the CPA. It is, the parties have the authority, if they want to, by mutual agreement, resolve Abyei through a different route. This is up to them, but they have to agree. We're less than 30 days, from the designated date, January 9, and at this point, the reality is it is from where we stand, virtually impossible to have a referendum in Abyei at this point, based on the work that has not been done and the progress that has not been made.
Would you encourage the North and South to negotiate an agreement on Abyei?
Again, this is up to them. There is a set requirement currently to have a referendum on Abyei, and that is what exists in the agreement, and the parties today are duty bound, to carry that out. But the parties themselves could agree on an alternative, but again, that is up to them.
PJ, on China, China is organizing a boycott of Friday's Nobel ceremony. They're encouraging countries not to send their diplomats, and a good handful have said they won't. Is the U.S. reaching out to these countries who said they won't attend, or taking any other action in response to what China's doing?
Nicole, all I can say is Barry White, our ambassador in Norway, he will be there on Friday.
Different topic. You're done.
No, that's it. Really, that's all you can say.
Well, we obviously strongly support the statement that was made by the Nobel Committee in selecting Liu Xiaobao to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. We think it's well deserved. We think there absolutely should be a ceremony. We think there absolutely should be recognition. We think that Mr. Liu and his wife should be there to be able to receive, the award. That is our clear position. All we can say is that we will be there on Friday to observe this recognition, and we know that we will not be alone.
But you're not saying anything to someone like President Karzai, whose country will not be attending?
Again, different countries will make up their own minds. We think the Nobel Committee has made a strong statement. We will associate ourselves with that statement in this event. It sends a strong statement about what all countries should strive to achieve, which is full human rights for all of their citizens, the ability to express their views, participate in the political process, and enjoy freedom of expression, freedom of association, and the opportunity to play a role in the future of any country. Those are universal human rights. We embrace them. We encourage other countries to embrace them. As to the decision whether an ambassador or representative will attend the ceremony on Friday, every country will make up its own mind. We'll be pleased to be there.
Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen has now been chosen as the next chairwoman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and in a statement has said that she's identified where she plans to cut the State Department and foreign aid budget. Do you have any reaction to that, and are you concerned about her planned cuts?
Well, we're in the process. Obviously, we're watching closely in terms of the decision that the Congress will make on funding for fiscal year 2011. We've been under a continuing resolution for the first 3 months of the fiscal year. We hope that Congress will provide full funding for the State Department for the rest of this fiscal year. The administration is putting the finishing touches on the President's budget for 2012. We understand that this is a very difficult economic environment. The Secretary has instructed all of us to work hard to achieve economies where we can. We think we've made a strong budget proposal that's still working its way through the internal system within the United States government. We were reluctant to see Jack Lew leave the Department of State and go to OMB, but we understand that he's sitting there overseeing a process and understands the importance of the funding that we are putting forward as part of the 2012 budget. A great deal of our funding is focused on frontline states, such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq. It's critically important that we continue to fund civilian operations in Iraq as we make the transition, from a military-led strategy to a civilian-led strategy. having spent something like $750 billion fighting two wars, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan, we believe that we need to have proper civilian funding so that we can finish the job in both countries. We think we have the right strategies. We think we have compelling programs in terms of supporting agricultural-led development through the Feed the Future program. We believe that we can make a compelling case to continue to support efforts on global health. So we look forward to engaging the new chairwoman of the committee, and we think we have a strong case to make.
Are you worried that she might cut your budget?
I'm sorry?
Are you worried that she might cut your
Well,
budget?
again, we recognize that as we go forward, budgets are going to be tighter and tighter. We recognize that over time, as the President has said and others have said, we have to attack the deficit, and government funding in every cabinet agency will be open to scrutiny. We will look forward to that engagement, that debate, but we believe that there are compelling reasons to support the civilian component of a balanced national security strategy that we think is in the national interest. Yes.
Some media says the New Mexico Governor Richardson,
Okay. Yep.
I'm sorry, will travel to North Korea next week. Is this true?
Well, I'll defer to the governor's office. We understand he has confirmed that he is going to North Korea. It's a private visit. He will be not carrying any particular message from the United States government.
Contacted you directly?
Normally, before Governor Richardson goes, he checks in with us. Whether that has happened yet or not, I don't know. But I would expect that we would have some contact with him just to bring him up to speed before he goes.
What about afterwards?
It's not unusual that when we have these kinds of high-level visitors, he'll let us know afterwards. President Carter did, come by and he debriefed the secretary in the aftermath of his visit. I would expect Governor Richardson to report back after he's done. But again, just to emphasize, this is a private visit, and he will not be carrying a message from the United States government.
Just on Iran, the meetings yesterday, can you say any more than you said yesterday about the informal encounters with the Iranians? Again, at what level those took place and what happened? Did they raise the hikers? And if you can't say that, why not? Why can't you say
Again,
that?
there were informal encounters. We raised a number of issues, including human rights, but I'm just not going to go into particulars. Sure.
Follow up on that. We know that Turkey is hosting next rounds. Are you expecting any other contribution from Turkey besides hosting the talks as a country?
Well, we'll be setting the agenda, led by Lady Catherine Ashton between now and then. We don't, rule out any role for any particular country, but obviously the P5+1 is the core group, and we expect next month to revolve around that same group.
How much do you think on the one hand, Turkey is trying to increase its trade with Iran and has a goal of triple the trade within the next 5 years. On the other hand, the U.S. government is trying to isolate Iran. How do you think these two allies are working?
Well, those are not in contradiction. Turkey is a neighbor of Iran. It does have an economic relationship with Iran. And in fact, there are categories where trade between countries and Iran are fully authorized. There are special categories under Resolution 1929 that are prohibited, and Turkey has clearly indicated publicly that it will abide by its international obligations. Thank you.